Welcome to Blue Collar Breakdown. This is, hold on. Edit mic sessions. Okay, I'm already, there we go. There we go. All right. I have some graphics today and I messed everything up. But welcome to the Blue Collar Breakdown number 4. I don't know what I'm going to do when I run out of fingers, but I'm going to keep telling you the number. Today we're going to talk about why can't they tax the rich? Why can't we balance the budget by taxing the rich? And before that, I want to get into what happened over the weekend, which was, yes, Trump started his third war by bombing Somalia. But I mean something that's kind of, in a way, related to what we're going to talk about today, which is the idea that there was no Epstein list. That's the new official mantra from the Trump administration. First, they campaigned and said, we're going to release the list and we're going to prosecute all the people who were on Epstein's list who were having sex with children, and we're going to prosecute them. Now, the official version is there is no list. And it goes to show how it doesn't matter which party is in charge, because Epstein was arrested in 2019. So Trump won. Trump 45 had a chance to release the list, get the information and say, look, all these people were on the list. He didn't do it. Then Biden came in, the Democrat, took over from Trump, the Republican, had 4 years to do it. Didn't do it. Then Trump came in and said, this time I'm really going to release the list, and didn't do it. Why? Well, I would suggest to you that the answer is they hate you enough that even though they had said there are thousands of young girls who were sexually assaulted in these videos that they have, they're not going to prosecute anyone. They're not going to, because that's less important to them. Thousands of girls being violated by very powerful people, including probably Prince Andrew of England, but also many American politicians who were definitely on the flight logs. That's not important to them. What's more important to them is covering up for a foreign government. In this case, it was obviously an Israeli honey trap. It was an Israeli intelligence, the Mossad. They would trap and bribe, not bribe. They would entrap and get dirt on congressmen and powerful political people, whether it's sometimes businessmen, military leaders, whatever, and then they would use that to blackmail them. And this is what happened. And Washington is now so enthralled, and by thrall I mean in chains, to Israel that it won't do that. They don't care enough about you, the people. They would rather you, American citizens, get molested by politicians, by them, and get away with it so that they could sell their principles out to a foreign government than actually tell you the truth. They are lying, and not only are they lying, they're making the statement that what matters to us, the statement we're making is, we're going to tell you a lie, and we know you're lying, and we know you know we're lying, and we're going to say it anyway. Because we want to show that no matter what, nobody's going to get prosecuted. They can get away with anything. That's what they're going to do. That's how much the politicians hate you. So with that as an example, let's turn that to economics. How much do the politicians hate you? Well, gee, if you listen to any Democrat, they say what we should be doing is taxing the rich. And what we can do is, they don't really say then we can cut taxes for the middle class and the poor. But they do say we need to tax the rich. And you know what? If we're going to continue to spend as much as we are, we're going to have to raise more taxes. We cannot put on debt the way we're putting it on forever and expect it to be normal. The United States government is right now about 120% debt to GDP ratio. It's higher than it was at the end of World War II. And there's no end in sight. At least in World War II, at the end of the war, they had huge budget cuts, massive budget cuts. We have nothing like that today. The Trump administration, the big, beautiful bill, made big government bigger. It actually spent more. And it will continue to spend more. All of the, as I mentioned in the last podcast, almost all of the cuts are postponed for 2 elections so that the Democrats have a chance to win, which they likely will at the midterms, and make sure that those don't get through. So what if we just, like Elizabeth Warren says, like Bernie Sanders said, the millionaires and billionaires, we should tax the billionaires, okay? And just let's take a look at that briefly. Now, I have a piece coming out at the Libertarian Institute probably tomorrow, but no promises. I told them they could run it whenever, so that it could be a week or 2. But I would guess maybe it's coming out tomorrow. Where I run a scenario. Okay, let's say the federal government has to balance the budget, not give Medicare for all, not end homelessness, not do any other, create any other new social program. Let's just say we just tax the billionaires to balance the budget. Now, right now, thanks to the big, beautiful bill being passed, the annual federal deficit is $2.3 to $2.4 trillion, or maybe a little bit more than that. And the total wealth of all billionaires as of last year, it's probably a little bit more than that now, was 5.7 billion. So what that means is there's about 2 years of money in taxing the billionaires. If we want to bankrupt every billionaire, if we start with Elon Musk and then work our way down to Jeff Bezos and the Walton family who owns Walmart and the 2 billionaires that own Google, and then just work our way down, we could balance the budget by making the first 12 billionaires bankrupt, the richest 12 billionaires bankrupt the first year, and by bankrupting all of the other billionaires the next year, theoretically. That's what my piece is about. Of course, really, there aren't enough to go around because, Elon Musk is worth, well, actually, he's worth a lot less in the last week because he decided to create a separate political party and has angered Donald Trump a bit. Tesla stock has gone back down below 300. At least it was earlier today. So his valuation at 440 billion is probably significantly less right now. But if we were to go after the billionaires and tax them and just take their wealth, all right, just take their wealth, what you'd find is you wouldn't get the $5.7 billion of all their wealth. What would happen is, and we saw a bit of that when Elon Musk tried to buy Twitter. He had to sell a lot of Tesla stock in order to get the funds to buy Twitter stock. And I think he ended up spending about $45 billion to gain a controlling interest in Twitter. And he had to sell a substantial amount, not a majority share, but a substantial amount of Tesla stock. And Tesla stock went from $330 a share down to just over 100. So it lost 2/3 of its value, with Elon Musk still holding a substantial amount. So actually getting 400 billion out of Elon Musk is kind of a pipe dream. When you sell off the stock or you take the stock, the company gets devalued. And in fact, in my piece, I talk about how basically all of these companies will go bankrupt without the primary stockholders' stock being with all of the primary stockholders' stock being taken away. Jeff Bezos and his wife, uh, what's his wife's name? I whatever. She still owns a substantial amount of stock. If they go after that pair, Amazon's going to not have the capital to continue. And if they do, if you get all kinds of capital from abroad, now all of a sudden, gee, all the big tech companies like Google and Amazon and what's the other big one, Cisco and all the rest of them, they're all going to be foreign owned. They're going to be foreign owned because all of the foreign money theoretically would have to come in and rescue these companies. Because there's just not enough capital. Anyway, that's not what's going to happen. So what if we tried to tax the rich the other way, the traditional way, the way that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren says, look, back in the 50s, we had a tax rate of 90% for the super rich, the top 1%. What if we taxed them 90% again? We would get all kinds of extra money, and we could maybe balance the budget, maybe not cut the taxes for middle class or whatever, but we could maybe balance the budget. And the reality is the rich, the top 1%, are paying the highest share of taxes that they've paid since before World War II. All right. And before World War II, just so you know, and by taxes, I mean income taxes. Okay. So, because that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about total taxes. I want to get into that in a bit too. But the rich are paying the highest share of income taxes of any period that has been measured since before World War II, when the middle class was not taxed by the income tax. The income tax was only for the rich before World War II, pretty much. And so the share of taxes being paid is higher by the rich, even though the rate they're paying is lower. And why is that? Well, I mean, let's look at this one chart. Okay. This is by a leftist. Oops, that's not it. That's not by a leftist. That's me. That's not it. Okay, this one's by a leftist. This is Gabriel Zucman. He's a professor at UC Berkeley, and Thomas Piketty, a French economist. And they were pretty famous maybe about a dozen years ago. They went on Jon Stewart's Daily Show and talked about how the wealth is increasingly accumulated in the hands of the super rich. Actually, let's look at that one first. This is the top 1% pre-tax income share. Okay, let's see. Which one am I looking at? Okay, wealth share. Here's the top 1%, 0.1% wealth share. So if you look at it in the 20s, okay, there was a lot of wealth held by a high percentage of the wealth in America was held by the super rich. And then it went down, down, down right until about 1975. And then it started turning back, or maybe even 76, 77. And then it turned around, and you could see ever since then, it's been on pretty much an upward slope. They've got two little bands there. The little blue bands are the newer numbers that they have. They've adjusted their numbers over time. But the trend is basically the same. The trend is the rich are getting richer. Okay. And if we look at the income share, let's see, pre-tax income share for the top 1%. This is how much money they're making. And if you look at the tax rate paid, the actual tax paid, I should have grabbed one of those slides. The rich do pay a very high percentage of income taxes in America. I want to stress, however, the richer you are, the more likely you are to get your income from non-income tax funds like you will be taxed by capital gains rather than the income tax. So what I'm talking about is stocks, real estate, commodities, things that don't involve labor, because labor is one of those things. In fact, that was one of the key things that I wanted. I've stressed over the times. This is a chart I prepared for the Libertarian Institute for a piece I wrote a few months ago. And here's the tax rate at every income level up to $500,000. And you can see here, labor is taxed roughly at double the rate of capital, because capital is taxed by the capital gains tax, which is generally speaking capped at 15%. It goes up to 20% once you reach a certain income threshold. But labor, the first dollar, you get the entire inflation tax, which is usually around 3%, although we saw in 2022 it was 8%. Then, so in my chart, it's 3%. And the payroll tax starts at 15.3%. So right away, you're almost up to 20%. You're almost, if you look, the first dollar, you're almost at the maximum rate for a super rich person. And then you add in the income tax. As you make more money, you pay more income tax, and you can see the rate goes up and up and up. And labor generally pays higher taxes than capital. So I see this as, the problem is not so much the rich are not paying enough, but that the working poor and the middle class are paying too much. If you look at, say, for example, the tax rates, you compare them from World War II and today. So when we were fighting a world war, the tax rates are about the same, and the middle class is paying a little bit more than they were during World War II. But we're not fighting a war. There's no benefit to throwing off a foreign superpower like Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan. We're not, the middle class isn't getting any benefit from this, but we are paying a higher tax than we were during that time, when there was all kinds of rationing and shortages. And of course, a lot of Americans are on this, are right now in economic desperation. They're just a speeding ticket or a flat tire away from financial collapse. Many Americans are. Okay. So let's say they raise the income tax on the rich. And I actually think they could raise it a bit. But the problem is, it's kind of like, after a certain point, it becomes like this balloon. You can squeeze and you can get almost the whole balloon, but you try to squeeze tighter and the money goes elsewhere. Okay. It's kind of like this balloon. You just can't, no matter how you try to squeeze it, you can't get the whole thing. You can only get it if you're like this. But if you squeeze tighter, it escapes. And what happens is, and countries have done this in the past. They've done high tax rates, like England had like a 70% tax rate in the 60s. And what happened was, a lot of musicians just relocated to the United States, to Africa, to other countries. In France, a couple decades ago, maybe just one decade ago, they raised their income tax rate. And one of the actors, Gerard Depardieu, he expatriated and left France because the income tax was too high. So the problem can be, they leave the country. In the 50s and 60s in the United States, now the income tax rate in the United States was about 90% throughout the 50s. John Kennedy cut it to about 60% in the 60s, and Reagan cut it to 28% in the 80s. And it has gradually gone up to about 39% right now in the United States. It might be back to 37% with the Trump tax cuts, but it's in the 30s. And what happened was, the proportion of taxes collected by income taxes collected by the super rich, just the income taxes again, was quite low in the 50s, and it got it a little higher in the 60s, a little higher in the 80s, and then it got much higher in from the 1990s on with the Clinton tax increases. So there's this thing called the Laffer curve, and basically what it does. Well, before I get to that, um, in the 50s and 60s, one of the reasons why a lot of corporations and a lot of rich people had avoided paying that 90% taxes. They simply just didn't want to do it. So how do you do it? Well, there were all kinds of loopholes. So they had expense accounts. So they had, instead of buying a luxury car on their own and declaring the income and paying the taxes on it, they just had the company buy them a car or the company buy them a yacht. They were all these expenses that they were reimbursed. There were also a lot of the money, it wasn't worth declaring it as income. So a lot of investors just piled their salary back into the company as investments so that they could then declare that as income later and as capital gains, so that or later in their career when they pulled it out. So there were all kinds of little loopholes of being able to do that kind of thing, and that's why, even though the tax rate was 90%, they didn't really collect that much in the form of income taxes. The rich will always find the best lawyers and the best accountants to take advantage of all the loopholes. That's just the reality of things. And there's probably I was getting to the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve is basically this. If you have an income tax or any tax at zero, but let's just do income taxes. At zero, you got to raise zero money. If you have an income tax of 100%, you're going to raise zero money because nobody's going to do any work or nobody's going to declare their income. So somewhere in the middle, you get more money. And, the question, Arthur Laffer, who's still alive, I think he's probably in his 70s or 80s, he named the curve after himself because, well, why not? But it's a simple supply and demand thing. He said, where's the peak where you can get the most revenue? And my guess is it's somewhere around the 50% range. So I think if they raise taxes a little bit on the rich, they could probably get a little bit more revenue, but they're not going to get 2.5 trillion, 2.4, 2.5 trillion. They're just not going to get it. It's not, there's no way we balance the budget that way. So anyway, what I think we need to work on is not so much where do we get more taxes from the rich? Because it's not going to balance the budget. We need to balance the budget. And if you look at the taxes, what we want to do is cut taxes for labor. We want to cut taxes for the working poor, especially, but also for the middle class. And how do we do that? We have to cut spending. And we also should work on getting rid of the most regressive taxes. And the most regressive tax that we have, other than I've long said inflation is the most regressive tax, or the tax that hurts the poor the most. But I think debt might be, because debt taxes people with no assets. It taxes your children and grandchildren yet unborn. It hands them a bill. When they're born, they have this bill, and they don't even have, the poorest working man has his labor, but they don't even have that yet. So it's the most regressive tax. But after that, inflation. You think about the poorest guy, and I've told this story a million times before in other podcasts, but I'll tell it for the first time. I think the first time here. I hope it isn't. There was a nightclub comic who talked about coming up to a bum on the side of the road, or whatever you want, a homeless person. And he's got this sign out, "We'll work for food." And the nightclub comic says, "Congratulations." And the guy was like, "What?" He goes, "You're even. You're working for food you're going to eat today. I'm still working for the Taco Bell I ate 7 years ago." All right. The idea is the laborer is sort of a creditor. All right. The poorer a person is, the more he must be a creditor in society. You think the poorest people are the ones who own debt, but that's not true. The poorest person is the only thing he has is his labor. He doesn't own anything. In order to have debt, you have to have credit. And the poorer you are, the less credit you have. The guy on the side of the road who's going to work for food, that's who inflation hurts the most. Because if you go down the list of assets that you own or that you need, the list of necessities, well, the first thing you need to do is you need to work for your living. So you have your labor. And inflation taxes labor. Now, how does it tax labor? Well, what is inflation? It's an increase in the supply of money. And what it does is it decreases the value of the dollars in your hands. So I have dollars in my hands and they're getting less and less value. I don't have dollars in my hands. You can't see them, but if you have dollars in your hand, they're getting less and less valuable because the Federal Reserve is printing more dollars and you're losing them. So what does that do? If you have dollar denominated assets or you are owed dollar denominated assets, then you lose. However, if you owe dollar denominated assets or you have non-dollar denominated assets, like things that aren't classified in dollars, like stocks. I mean, yeah, sure, they're evaluated in dollars, but they're not really classified in dollars, like a loan. If you put your money in a bank, for example, the bank owes you. You put $1,000 in the bank owes you $1,000. All right. When inflation hits, that $1,000 becomes less valuable, and the bank, they kind of owe you less. And it's the same thing. If you look down the assets, anything that's dollar denominated, so that would be labor. The first thing a person needs to do is labor. They have to work for food. They have to get money so they can buy food. Food is heavily taxed, but it's not really subject to inflation. You need clothing, same thing. You also need shelter. And a poor person, a rich person can, even a middle-class person, although less and less so, can get a mortgage on a house and take out a loan. And it's really good if there's inflation because you don't have to pay as much back. Your mortgage gets easier and easier to pay as the years go by. But if you're a renter, it gets harder. The rent goes up with inflation. And not only that, the laborer is a creditor to the landlord. I mean, when you first go to the landlord, what does he say? I want first, last, and security deposit. He wants 3 months rent, right? Usually roughly equivalent, before you even live in there. You as a renter are a creditor to your landlord. So that money is being taken away by inflation. You need food, clothing, you need your labor. Oh, and you need a place to put your labor, right? So even after you make you've loaned your employer your labor and you're waiting for payday, inflation's taking that money away. But after you get your labor, you get your check, what do? You put it in the bank. The bank starts taking it away from inflation too. This is the most regressive tax because no amount of inflation ever sunk a yacht. No amount of inflation ever lowered the value of a stock. No amount of inflation ever took a penny of value from any real estate holding. All right. These are the assets that the rich hold. This is why the richer, the 0.1%, 60, 70, sometimes 80% of their income is not related to wages and regular earnings. It's just investment income. And so they don't pay income tax on it. They pay the lower capital gains tax that we talked about earlier. Remember I showed that I still have I still have the chart up here. I'm going to take it down, but you can see that's what they pay on their real estate holdings when they sell it, not until. On their stocks when they sell it, not until. But with your labor, as soon as you get your check, you're getting that withholding tax. You're getting that withholding tax right away. Okay, so this is really, in my view, this is the problem. The high tax rate for the middle class and the working poor. No amount of tax is going to balance the budget. We need to cut spending and then cut spending more so that we can cut taxes for the middle class and poor. This is why I'm a libertarian. And by the way, I'm a libertarian. So when I say we could raise income taxes for the wealthy a little bit before the balloon, where's my balloon? I can't find it. I lost it. Maybe it popped. There it is. Before the income starts escaping to other countries or through deductions or through corporate expense accounts or reinvestment in capital or some sort of accounting trick. Yeah, we could do that. But I'd prefer no income tax whatsoever. I mean, ideally, I'd like to get rid of the income tax too. But let's start with taxes on the middle class, taxes on the working poor. Okay, I think I've gone a little bit. No, I'm good time wise. All right, I'm going to finish up here. I just want to make one more point though before I go. Inflation creates this income disparity because it is the most regressive tax, and we have entered the age of inflation. Before the 1930s. Really, even before 1971, we didn't have that much inflation because the dollar was still tied to gold. And it's ever since we've had more inflation, the income disparity has gotten wider and wider, and especially higher in those inflationary years. If you look back at this numbers now, let's see if I can find one of these. Okay, top wealth share. Let's use this one instead. This one here. Top 1% pre-tax income. And if you look, the inflation really starts, the larger percentage of the wealthiest getting more and more income really starts in the inflationary era of the 70s. And it gets worse. And it jumped again in 2022, with the 8% inflation, because the working poor just didn't keep up with their wages. Their wages did not match inflation. And a lot of the wealthy people did very well in the stocks. The stock market is doing just fine, even though there's some pretty wide swings right now. So I would suggest that one of the prime movers of this wealth disparity, not the only one, but one of the prime movers is inflation. Also, I think the very high and punitive payroll tax that supposedly pays for Social Security and Medicare, even though it really doesn't. It goes into the general fund. That also is very regressive. So we need to look at that. But one of the important things to note is, the rich are getting richer. But here's the thing. Back before 1970, 73, 4 even, the poor and the middle class got richer as well. And U.S. GDP growth was often 4 or 5% per year. And it was over 3% 2 out of 5 years. And it's only been over 3% if you want to do it on a per capita basis, one time since the year 2000. And that was the COVID snapback year. So the GDP is advancing slower, and the rich are getting it, and the middle class and poor are not. So that's growth that is not. The rich are still getting richer the way they always were. It's just that the middle class and the poor are not getting rich the way they were in the post-war period. Okay. All right. I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to make this appeal for funds, but also make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast if you found it edifying. And I'll be back next week with another episode. I will be doing interviews soon, so keep tuned every Wednesday. And some of the interviews won't be on Wednesdays, but I will always try to do a Wednesday podcast. And hey, buy me a coffee.